Hey, what's going on, guys? It is Dibs, Mr. Crockpot on Twitter. Today, we are breaking down why Doc Rivers is a failed experiment with the Philadelphia 76ers. My man Tiago wrote an in-depth article over at thepaintlines.com breaking down why Doc is not the best fit for the Sixers. Follow my man Tiago on Twitter at TiagoPHL. Let's get started.
My point is, I didn't hear you asking about when we were losing those close games. What did you think about? You happy about the loss because you were close with an undermanned team? No, it's not the same thing. My point is, Keith, it's a dumbass question.
The NBA is a results-based business, but in Philadelphia, this has taken a backseat to Doc Rivers' delusionary self-narrative and the ownership's refusal to admit a massive mistake. So here we are, 2 years into this destructive relationship. What is at stake? A ton. How much? Well, for one, Joel Embiid is about to turn 29 years old and without even a single Eastern Conference Finals to his resume. James Harden, fresh off an alarmingly passive postseason, is staring at a contract extension that could cripple Philadelphia's salary cap situation moving forward. Amidst these fork-in-the-road moments lies Doc Rivers. The Sixers head coach will note that winning is challenging and that climbing the mountain is not for everyone. Doc will also point out how he has elevated this team's expectations since his arrival. That is unless, of course, you completely erase history and the fact his predecessor came to a Game 7 bounce away from potentially leading Philadelphia into the NBA Finals. This was in 2019. 3 years later, the Sixers appear further than ever from that elusive championship. Where has it gone wrong can be traced directly to Doc Rivers' arrival in Philadelphia. Let's talk about historic offensive incompetency. It is easy to paint a nice picture of Philadelphia's 2-year offensive output under Doc Rivers. On the surface, the Sixers have teetered as a league average group with an occasional impressive outburst. James Harden's arrival should have flipped the dynamic closer to the league's elite. It did not. But the storyline crumbles when you factor in one key element. That is Joel Embiid's MVP level play that coincided with Doc Rivers' arrival. Some will point out to Doc as the reason, but those who follow Embiid very closely could see his offensive game take a massive leap in Orlando's bubble. Credit to Joel in what could have been a moment to lift Philadelphia's offense into the upper echelon. But Rivers' increasingly stale, low-paced, and even lower three-point volume offense has sputtered next to Joel Embiid's historic run. How bad is it? Only 2 MVPs have led offenses outside of the top 10 since 2001. With MVP play from its superstar, Philadelphia has finished outside of the top 10 in both of Doc Rivers' seasons in Philadelphia. Making matters worse, the Sixers once again collapsed as an offensive unit in the postseason. Rivers is very quick to throw a player under the bus.
Doc, do you think Ben Simmons can still be a point guard for a championship team like the one you guys want to become?
Yeah, David, I don't know that question or the answer to that right now.
What's up, Ben? Or point out a plethora of excuses that remove him from any responsibility.
What part of this loss would you attribute to coaching?
I don't know. Would you ask Pop that question?
But the reality is, warning signs were there from the very beginning. Failing to capitalize on 2 monstrous Embiid seasons is a fireable offense in its own right. But in Doc's world, this is a small price to pay for apparently bigger gains down the road. That is, if you neglect the odds that we may have seen the best of Joel Embiid's time in Philadelphia. Or that is at some point, Embiid might just want to test the waters for a different organization. Let's talk about the postseason, and boy, does history have an awkward way of repeating itself. Fresh off another disappointing playoff run, many Sixers players, including the general manager, echoed similar sentiments about an ingrained lack of toughness among the team. Here are some post-game remarks that should raise a few eyebrows. It's mental toughness. I think that part of it. I don't think we have it yet, per Tobias Harris. When you have size and toughness, that goes a long way, per Joel Embiid. They really went out there and took it, and we need some of that toughness, per Daryl Morey. While only Doc can speak to the makeup of his own team, we don't need a quote book to land on how the Sixers sputtered against the Miami Heat. decorated Heat head coach Erik Spoelstra is a mastermind in adjustments, and as the series tilted in Philadelphia's favor, he made one subtle move to deny Joel Embiid the ball on the block. Aggressive double teams that fronted the post and squeezed passing windows proved to be a horror show for the Sixers' increasingly stagnant offense.
13-2 run over the last 5 minutes by Miami. Here's Embiid. They double him. He takes
Embiid. Now look at the three red shirts moving in on him.
How much did Philadelphia's offense revert back to isolation-heavy basketball? Just take a look at how aggressively Rivers steered away from the Sixers' potent Embiid-Harden pick and roll. Without its main outlet, Philadelphia averaged an embarrassing low 95.6 offensive rating in games 5 and 6. Possessions often equated to Joel Embiid fighting off 2 to 3 defenders while teammates stood around in amazement. Lack of ball and player movement went from bad to non-existent, and the Sixers finished the series averaging an excessively high 10.7 attempts with 4 to 0 seconds left on the shot clock. That is pathetic. Doc Rivers is quick to point out to factors outside of his control, but the reality is his predictable offense submarined for a second straight postseason in Philadelphia. Last year, he singled out the other star player on the way to vacation. This season, injuries took the proverbial toll. No matter how you view it, one thing is clear. Doc Rivers will unapologetically repeat the same losing playbook time in and time again. And then we get to Doc Rivers' poor lineup and personnel deployment. What if I told you that the Sixers starting lineup averaged an astonishing plus 52 net rating over the last 2 postseasons? Would you even believe that such a talented group would be capable of 2 spectacularly pitiful playoff exits? Here we are again. Combining through the mess left by Doc Rivers' inherent lineup groupings is an exercise that will leave anyone pulling out its hair. In 2021, Philadelphia starters compiled a playoff best plus 39 net rating. Rather than reshuffle the deck and slowly mix in bench players, Doc Rivers doubled down on an all-bench lineup that aided Atlanta's comeback in a critical Game 5. The reserve group finished the postseason with a minus 15 rating, opening the door to another historic postseason collapse. But lost in the shuffle of that particular Sixers playoff loss was a trend that has become the trademark of Doc Rivers. Trae Young and Tyrese Maxey logged a low 156 playoff minutes, registering less playing time than inept veterans George Hill and Furkan Korkmaz. The message in Rivers' world is quite simple. It is one that leaves little to no wiggle room for young players to develop. While some coaches look to reasons to play their young guys early, Doc Rivers is very quick to point out flaws as to why rookies should never leave the bench.
We have a whole coaching staff who, I'm just going to guess, knows a little bit more. And they watch every game. They watch every practice. We believe against Big 5, DJ is good for us.
If the goal is to stack regular season wins under your resume, this probably makes sense. But the Sixers entered the postseason with a glaring hole at the backup center, and after handing out 214 catastrophic regular season minutes to his old pal DeAndre Jordan, Doc Rivers suddenly, and out of sheer necessity, had to push all of his chips towards Paul Reed. Rivers' handling of Reed is a classic example of a proud veteran-only mindset. Reed had spent most of the season toying around in the G League, but as the non-Embiid minutes peaked to massive failures, Rivers was left to find no other alternative. The only problem? Reed entered the postseason averaging 7.9 minutes per game and mostly mop-up duties. Minutes that should have been used to develop Paul Reed fell in the lap of Rivers' most trusted allies, regardless if they had done anything to earn them. Reed looked surprisingly capable, but positioning and fouling issues could have been addressed with consistent NBA coaching. In the end, Rivers only exacerbated a dire situation by boxing himself in a corner. Call it the Doc special. So what is left now? Where do the Sixers go from here? Ownership's intent to maintain Doc Rivers into next season is alarming, to say the least. Some rumblings suggest this will be a play to entice other teams to potentially trade for Doc Rivers. It is hard to envision a world where teams are willing to part assets for a head coach who has looked increasingly past his prime. But this is the NBA, and weirder things have happened. Regardless of the outcome, one thing is abundantly clear. This Doc Rivers tenure has been nothing short of disastrous, one that could be the final nail of this Sixers era. What do you think about Doc Rivers returning to Philadelphia next season? Let us know down in that comment section below. Be sure to subscribe. Thank you everyone for watching. Stay awesome.